Ever had a tenant flood their own flat on purpose? Well, I have. And that was just the start. Drugs, police raids, thousands of pounds in damage. This is the side of property investing no one talks about. Let me show you what really happened. Not all property stories are about quick wins and easy cash flow. Some are very messy, painful, and test every ounce of your patience and resolve. Today, I'm pulling back the curtain on one of my own properties, a flat that turned into a 6-month nightmare involving drugs, damage, and legal battles. If you think being a landlord is simple, well, think again. There's a side to property investing that rarely makes it onto YouTube. It's not glamorous, it's not motivational, and honestly, it's the kind of thing that makes most people walk away from this business altogether. Today, I'm taking you inside one of my own flats, a property that turned into a complete nightmare for over 6 months. This wasn't just a case of a difficult tenant or missed rent. It became a drug den. It spiraled into a legal battle, and it drained money, time, and energy far beyond what most landlords expect to deal with. But more than that, I want to use this story to shine a light on the darker side of being a landlord. The stuff no one talks about, and to push back a little on the narrative that landlords are all villains, because the truth is we're the ones who carry the risk, take the damage, and get very little support when things go wrong. This flat should have been a straightforward let. The property was clean, well located, and perfectly suited to someone looking for a normal mid-range rental. At first, things seemed fine. The tenant moved in, rent was paid, and there were no early signs of trouble. But it didn't take long for everything to change. Payments stopped, messages were ignored, then the complaints started pouring in from the other tenants. We were told that people were coming and going at all hours of the night. Loud music was blasting out from the apartment in the early hours of the morning. The tenant was shouting in the stairwells and even hanging out of the windows and shouting abuse to random people in the street. He was leaving the front door to the building unlocked so randomers could help themselves into the building. The whole situation was out of control. We even had reports from multiple people, our tradesmen, letting agents and others, all saying the same thing. There were clear signs of drug use inside the flat. It had become a magnet for trouble. The atmosphere in the building completely changed. Other tenants were scared, and honestly, I can't blame them. As if all of this wasn't bad enough, the building was then raided by the police and they arrested the tenant. Of course, the police don't really share information about the event, but they did confirm that they arrested the tenant, but he was released a few hours later. Police don't just randomly raid properties though. These events have to be prepared for, so it's quite obvious that they'd been watching the building and the tenant for some time. And after all of this, drug use, not paying rent, disturbing the peace, it didn't make our legal process any easier, and we couldn't just simply evict him. Although we were experiencing all of these troubles and our other tenants were also massively suffering, we still had to go through the lengthy, expensive legal system that, quite frankly, favours the tenant. You'd think something like a police raid and evidence of drug use would be enough to fast-track an eviction. It wasn't. What followed was one of the most frustrating periods I've ever experienced as a landlord. We had to go through the full process of serving notice, then wait the correct amount of time for the tenant to either respond or leave willingly. Whilst we were following all of the rules, filing everything with the court and paying thousands of pounds in legal fees and lost rent, all just to remove someone who was actively destroying the property and putting others at risk. It took over 6 months to regain possession, and during that time, things only got worse. While we were waiting for our court hearing date, the tenant was deliberately sabotaging the apartment and turning things up to 11 just to upset the other residents and to get back at us. And then he did something I still can't quite believe. Over the course of a week, he kept turning the bath taps on, leaving the plug in, and letting the water run. Not just once, but over and over again. As you can imagine, the water started overflowing, flooding the bathroom floor, and because this flat was on the second floor, the damage didn't stop there. It started leaking through the floor and into the 2 flats below. We're not talking about a faulty pipe or accidental overflow. this was entirely intentional. He was flooding his own flat and destroying the homes beneath him. Ceilings were dripping, floors were soaked, and the people living underneath were understandably furious, messaging us constantly asking what we were doing to stop it, as if we had the legal power to intervene. But the truth is we didn't. I couldn't just go down there and forcefully remove him. That wouldn't have been legal. So I called the police because at that point this was criminal damage and I had no other option. I was stuck, helpless, and despite how serious the situation was, the police didn't turn up. In fact, I never heard back from them at all. So all I could do was sit there, watch this guy destroy my building and wait for the court system to slowly grind into action. Technically, the tenant could have actually left the water running for 6 months whilst we were waiting for those courts to give us possession. Although I would hope that police would have stepped in at some point if that was to have happened, but I can't hold my breath on that one as they weren't very helpful in our situation. A month or so later, we started to get messages from other tenants saying that there were bad odours coming from the flat and the drain pipes and that the drains at the back of the building were blocked. Of course, we had no idea what it was and I just thought this was a separate incident to our problem tenant, as pipes do get blocked from time to time and naturally if there's a build-up and a blocked pipe, it's going to smell. This will become clearer in a moment though. A few months later, after our court hearing where, surprise, surprise, the tenant didn't even bother to show up, we finally got confirmation that we were given possession back to our property and that by law, the tenant had to leave by a certain date. This was a huge win for us as it could have gone either way. Even though the tenant was causing so many issues, the courts are so strict that landlords can lose a case just by a misspelled word on the notice. And if that had happened, we'd have been back at square one. Now, the drama wasn't over yet though, as although we'd been granted permission, we then had to wait for the courts to instruct the bailiffs who would attend the property to forcefully remove the tenant. However, believe it or not, this can take up to another 6 months for the bailiffs to be instructed. At this point, the tenant knew he'd lost the battle. It was only a matter of time before he was out for good. He'd also been handed a CCJ, which, while it didn't cover our losses, gave us some small satisfaction. At least now future landlords will be able to see his records and hopefully think twice before handing him the keys. A few months later, we finally got a date for the bailiffs and it couldn't have come soon enough. The complaints kept coming in, loud music at all hours, more antisocial behaviour and other tenants still asking when he'd be gone. To them it probably looked like nothing was happening. Even though possession had been granted, he remained in the flat for months and until the bailiffs were formally instructed, we still had no legal way to remove him. Eviction day finally arrived. The bailiffs and locksmiths turned up at the property and after months of stress, damage and lost income, you'd expect the tenant to cause more trouble on the way out. I was expecting the worst, that he'd had barricaded the door, refused to leave, get aggressive or try to make a scene. And I even asked our solicitors what would happen if it all kicked off and they told me the bailiffs had full authority to remove him physically if needed, and if he resisted or things escalated, the police would be called, no hesitations. That gave us some confidence that this would finally be the end of it, and to be fair, it was. The bailiffs arrived and he was already packing up. He took what he wanted from the flat, simply handed over the keys without a word and walked away, just like that. After everything, months of antisocial behaviour, thousands in rent arrears and legal fees, the damage to the property, he simply walked away and vanished. Now, if you remember earlier, I mentioned a smell. A foul, lingering smell had started to come through the pipes in the weeks and months leading up to the eviction. It got worse and worse, and not just in the flat, but throughout the building and even through the external pipework. Found out why. Now, I must warn you, this next bit is not for the faint-hearted. Take a look at this video that my plumber sent us a day after we evicted the tenant.
Hiya Tom, here's the video as requested. I have my my mouth covered by the way, but I'll show you what I mean. So this is kind of mid, this isn't too bad. This one again isn't too bad. You can't smell the video yet. Here is where, I mean, I've become nose blind to it now, which is pretty worrying in fact, but there's a drugs operation I don't know, you can see the flies, a few of them on video. There's about 20 in here, I would have said. You can see that, I don't know if you can see the flies, I don't know if they're showing on video, but there's thousands of little mini ones all, like, seem to be hatching from here. I can't go in there. That is just filled with sludge. Filled with shit, basically. How's that for a cup of tea?
This video doesn't actually do it justice, as it doesn't look too bad, but you can tell by the way the plumber is struggling to talk and breathe in the video that this is not good. Not only had he wrecked the flat with flooding, which destroyed the floors, but it also left us a parting gift. He had been using the bath as a toilet. Not the actual toilet, the bath. From the look of it, he'd been doing this for weeks, probably months, just out of spite, out of pure malice. He'd been deliberately leaving his own human waste in the bath, letting it accumulate and seep through the pipes as a form of retaliation against the eviction. But beyond that, it raises a deeper concern. How can someone live like that for months on end? He knew his time was up. Why live in that filth up until the last moment? This disgusting act caused the smell, the blocked pipes, and another hefty bill, thousands more, to professionally remove and dispose of what's classed as hazardous waste. You can't just call a cleaner in for that. It has to be handled by specialists legally and safely, and it isn't cheap. Between the legal fees, the cleanup, the missed rent, and the damage to the building, this one tenant ended up costing us well over £5,000. And that's before you even account for the time, stress, the knock-on impact it had on other tenants. Now imagine that being your business. Imagine running a business where a customer can come in, refuse to pay, trash the place, break the law, get raided by police, endanger others, and you still have to tiptoe through the legal system for months just to stop them. And here's the double standard. If a landlord forgets to fix a dripping tap or delays a repair, tenants are straight on the phone to the council, who will then send inspectors and potentially issue notices to the landlord for not keeping a property up to standard. But when tenants flood flats, invite in drug activities or leave behind human waste, it's the landlord who pays the bill. Financially, legally, emotionally, with barely any support from the very system that's supposed to be fair. There's a growing narrative in the media that landlords are the bad guys. Greedy, exploitive, always trying to raise rents and evict vulnerable people. And yeah, don't get me wrong, I know there are bad landlords out there, but the majority of us, we're just trying to run a business. We provide homes, just like supermarkets provide food, or Amazon delivers products. We all offer a service that is needed. No one's forcing you to shop with Amazon if you don't like Jeff Bezos. Then don't buy from him. Just like if you don't like landlords, don't rent. Go buy a home, but some people can't buy a home. Others don't want to because renting offers flexibility, access and speed. We provide a service that people want and need. And like any business, we take risks. When we get it wrong, when someone doesn't pay or damages our product, the law doesn't help us quickly. It traps us, it delays us, it costs us, and we still get blamed and made to look like the bad guy. So why am I still doing this? Why not just sell up, walk away, and avoid ever dealing with tenants like that again? Honestly, the thought has crossed my mind only for a split second. But here's the truth. Despite all of this, the model still works. If you approach property as a business and you learn from your losses and you build the right systems, you will survive these moments. And with each difficult experience, your radar improves. You spot red flags faster. You get clearer on the types of tenants and areas to avoid. You build stronger relationships with letting agents, better communication with solicitors, and more confidence in your processes. This very flat will go back on the market. It will be tenanted again, properly this time. We'll be more selective, we'll have new safeguards in place, and it'll generate income again. That's the nature of this game. It's hard sometimes, but if you stay calm, fix your systems and play the long game, you can come back stronger. Being a landlord isn't passive, it's not hands-off, it's not easy. Sometimes it means dealing with properties filled with drugs, chaos, sewage and court paperwork, and still having to smile through it and get the job done. But if you're in this for the long term, if you approach it professionally and treat every setback as a lesson, you build something that lasts. You build income, you build freedom, and you build resilience. And the next time someone says landlords are all the same, show them this. Show them what we deal with. Show them the costs. That's all from me for this video, guys. Thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate you for being a subscriber. I'll see you again on the next one.